Hi, I'm Toro, and welcome to Toro's History Lullabies. All my life, I've needed a little background noise to fall asleep. For years, it was just the hum of a fan or some soft static. But ever since wireless earbuds came into my life, I've found myself drifting off to podcasts and documentaries, learning and relaxing at the same time. That's why I started making these videos. Calming stories from history, told gently, to help you unwind, learn something new, and hopefully fall asleep a little easier. So get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's step quietly into the past. And if you enjoy these stories, I'd love it if you gave the video a like and subscribed for more. Sweet dreams.
The World in 1907. Hello, dear dreamer, and welcome back to Toro's History Lullabies. Wherever you are tonight, whether curled beneath a quilt, or swaying gently on a train of thoughts, I invite you now to rest your eyes, slow your breathing, and float with me into a quiet year, long ago. Let's drift back to 1907, a year that unfolded not in bursts, but in ripples, a time of steady inventions, soft diplomacy, and the hush before great tides of change. The skies were pale with coal smoke, but also alive with the first glimmers of flight. In parlors, radios were still a dream, and music lived in the vibrations of strings and keys. Let's go there together. To creaking carriages on muddy roads, to newsboys calling gently through misty morning streets, to a world just beginning to hum with modernity. Now breathe in and out. Let the ticking of the past soothe you to sleep. As we begin our journey into the world in 1907. World events in 1907. The world turned slowly on the axis of diplomacy and quiet transition. Far in the east, in the ancient city of The Hague, nations gathered in murmuring halls. It was the Second Peace Conference, where diplomats from many lands met with cautious hope. They spoke softly of arms reduction, of the rules of war, and the dream of lasting peace. Though they did not agree on everything, the fact that they spoke at all was its own quiet miracle. In the Russian Empire, the frost was deep, and so were the thoughts of reform. The Second Duma, a parliament of sorts, opened its chambers, a fluttering experiment in governance beneath the heavy czarist sky. It would not last, but in those early months, voices rose carefully in discussion, each word a step towards something new, or at least imagined. Across the Atlantic, in the United States, a gentle rumble of economic uncertainty echoed. It was the panic of 1907. Not a crash, but a deep financial sigh. Banks teetered, stocks dipped, and trust, that delicate thread, began to fray. But slowly, with calm intervention, the tide steadied again. From this quiet tremor would one day rise the idea of the Federal Reserve, but that was still a dream. Meanwhile, in the vast stretches of British colonial lands, New Zealand made a small, proud change. It shifted from colony to dominion, a word that meant more freedom, more identity. And across oceans, Canada and Australia watched and wondered what it might mean for them. And high above, in skies not yet conquered, the brown dog affair brewed quietly in Britain. Not a battle of arms, but of ethics, where science and compassion touched fingertips. It was about the rights of animals and the future of experimentation. A bronze dog statue in Battersea became a gentle symbol of protest, of protection, and of growing voices. So it was in 1907. A year of hushed steps and drawn curtains, of nations whispering instead of shouting, of change tiptoeing quietly across the globe. Daily life around the world in 1907. Daily life unfolded like a lullaby, in carriages, in crowded markets, in lamplit rooms. In London, the streets were lined with chimneys and cobblestones. The clop of hooves echoed beneath low fogs, and milkmen still delivered by cart, their bottles clinking softly in the dawn. Women wore long skirts with stiff collars. Men favored bowler hats and stiff mustaches. And children played marbles in alleyways, their laughter floating like birdsong. In Tokyo, a city of temples and telephone wires, tradition met the modern age. Kimonos brushed against Western suits, and rickshaws passed slowly beside early electric streetcars. Soba noodles steamed from roadside stalls, and school bells rang where once there were only monastery chants. In the American Midwest, prairie towns bloomed in golden quiet. Homes were warmed by coal stoves, and families gathered by candlelight. Dinner might be cornbread, baked beans, or stew slow-cooked through the afternoon. On Sundays, people dressed carefully for church, the air full of starch and hymns. And afterward, the porch swing creaked beneath stories and silences. Meanwhile, in the Ottoman Empire, bazaars shimmered with spices and woven silks. Men smoked gently from long pipes, and tea was poured with ceremony and care. The muezzin's call echoed through ancient stones, calling the faithful, marking time like a lullaby carved into air. In India, under the British Raj, daily life stirred with colors and contrasts. Bullock carts rolled down dusty paths, while trains clattered quietly across bridges built by empire. Markets burst with mangoes, linen, turmeric, and in quieter corners, poets still wrote by candlelight. Their verses carried on warm winds. Across continents, most homes were lit by gas or oil lamps. The night came earlier then, and with it, sleep. People read by soft flicker, wrote letters with fountain pens, and bathed from basins filled by hand. There were no smartphones, no buzzing notifications, only ticking clocks, chirping crickets, and the distant sound of a neighbor's dog or a child's yawn. In 1907, the world was slower, but no less full. Science, inventions, and technology in the hush of laboratories and quiet minds. 1907 brought forth gentle wonders. A man named Leo Baekeland created something extraordinary, a material called bakelite, the very first true plastic. Hard, smooth, and oddly beautiful, it would one day shape radios, telephones, and buttons. But for now, it sat humbly in workshops, a new beginning disguised as a curiosity. In the skies, dreamers like the Wright brothers still tinkered with wings. Their flying machines flapped and floated above sandy fields. A few feet here, a few seconds there. The miracle wasn't in how far they went, but in the idea that they went at all. In medicine, progress crept gently. Microscopes grew sharper, vaccines more precise. Doctors wore white coats and carried black bags, their tools cold, their knowledge growing. In hospitals lit by gaslight, patients whispered and waited, hope flickering like a flame in a storm. Electricity buzzed through more homes, street by street. Telephones hung on walls, their receivers heavy and warm to the ear. And typewriters clicked steadily in offices and newsrooms, spelling out the shape of modern work. In the seas, a ship called the Lusitania was launched, sleek, silent, and grand. It would become one of the most famous ocean liners. But in 1907, it was simply a marvel, slicing through the waves. And in quiet corners, inventors with ink-stained fingers dreamed of light, motion, and sound. The future was coming softly. Culture and the arts in 1907. Art swirled softly across canvas and stage. In Paris, a gentle revolution was brewing in oil and pigment. A young Spanish painter named Pablo Picasso began sketching the first strokes of what would become Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, a painting that would, in time, shift the very idea of vision. But for now, it rested quietly, like a secret in a studio. In Vienna, Gustav Klimt's gold-dusted canvases shimmered like dreams. His painting Hope, too, captured sorrow and radiance in the same gentle brushstroke. A meditation on life and longing, wrapped in pattern and glow. Across the Atlantic, Mark Twain was nearing the twilight of his storytelling days. He still held a pen, though slower now, writing with wit, sadness, and a sense of time slipping by. In London's West End and New York's Broadway, the stage lights glowed. Audiences in starched collars and feathered hats leaned forward to hear operettas and dramas. And in music halls, ragtime tickled the air, a rhythm both precise and playful. The phonograph played softly in some homes. A voice caught in wax, a melody spinning in slow circles. Recordings of Caruso or Sousa brought the world into living rooms. One scratchy note at a time. Books rested on bedside tables, wrapped in embossed covers, smelling faintly of ink and pressed paper. Poetry was still spoken aloud, and paintings were studied in silence. Culture in 1907 was not shouted, but whispered. It moved not in flashes, but in glows. Media and headlines in 1907. The news arrived folded and smudged. Newspapers were the heartbeat of the morning. Thick with ink, their pages rustled softly at breakfast tables and park benches. The New York Times, the Times of London, and Le Petit Journal delivered stories of parliaments, protests, and poetry. Side by side, headlines told of peace talks, rising prices, and maritime wonders. A cup of coffee might cost just a few cents, and a fine hat, a week's wages. There were no televisions, no push alerts or viral headlines. Only the slow pleasure of turning a page and reading one column at a time. In 1907, the world whispered its stories, and the people listened quietly. People born/died in 1907, new lives began, and old lives gently bowed. Born this year was Frida Kahlo, though she would not paint her first pane for decades still. Also arriving were John Wayne, who would one day stride across the silver screen, and Rachel Carson, whose quiet pen would sing of nature's fragile beauty. Elsewhere, lives came to a close. Like Dmitry Mendeleev, the Russian chemist who imagined the periodic table. He passed in February, his work still glowing in the minds of students to come. And in America, Joseph Lister, the father of antiseptic surgery, laid down his scalpel. His legacy, the millions who would live because of his soft insistence on cleanliness. In 1907, the torch passed quietly, from hand to hand, from breath to breath. And so, the world turned gently through the final weeks of 1907. Leaves fell in quiet courtyards. Snow dusted rooftops from Moscow to Montreal. Candles flickered in windows, and bells chimed the end of another year. There was no great parade to mark the changing calendar. Only soft hope, gentle rest, and quiet dreams of what might come. Children fell asleep to lullabies sung in a dozen languages. Parents planned for springtime, for new shoes, for longer days. The world had not yet seen the quakes that lay ahead, but for now it rested, breathing in peace, breathing out time. As the clock struck midnight and 1908 crept in on silent feet, the stars above continued their patient turning, and down below, the world slept. Thank you, dear listener, for drifting with me through the world of 1907. If this gentle journey brought you peace, consider liking, subscribing, or sharing Toro's History Lullabies. There are many more sleepy stories to come. For now, let your breath slow, let your thoughts settle, and let history sing you softly to sleep. Until next time, good night.